Hey friends, I'm Greg Nettle. Welcome to the Church Planting Podcast. I have the privilege of serving as president of Stadia New Church Planting, where our vision is for every child on the planet to have a church. We do this by helping you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation. We have a very special guest today. I've known this young leader for years, Josh Burnett. He's a church planter. He's wired in. He's an incredible entrepreneur. And today we're going to be talking about generative AI and technology and how it literally can transform the face of church planting, church leadership, and quite frankly, how we reach the world with the gospel. Josh Burnett on this episode of the Church Planting Podcast. Excited today to have my friend and colleague, Josh Burnett on the Church Planting Podcast. Welcome to the Church Planting Podcast, Josh.
Man, thanks, Greg. Really excited to be here. Yeah.
Josh, I was thinking about you before we were jumping on here, and just the fact of how entrepreneurial you are. But I mean, I've known you a long time, and let's go back and just talk about the early days. I mean, you were at Southeast Christian Church for a good many years, and I mean, one of the largest churches in the country. Let's walk back there. What was that like for you? What were you doing there?
Yeah. I mean, that's actually where my family came to Christ. And so when I was 9 years old, my family didn't go to church. We were, not doing well, quite frankly. And, somebody invited us to go to Southeast, and we showed up, and my whole life and our family's life really was transformed because of that church. And then it was, kind of a really incredible privilege to get to grow up there and be in that context and everything. But then I ended up being the preaching intern for Bob Russell, Dave Stone, and Kyle Idleman. Bob Russell's last year. So I watched the handoff happen to Dave Stone. It was crazy. So yeah.
So arguably three of the best communicators in the country, right? That you were actually working with. What does that mean, preaching intern?
Yeah, so it was a lot of watching and learning, and getting to be in rooms that I probably shouldn't have been. And, just in terms of getting to be present for meetings and watching each of them, their sermon writing process and participating in that, so each week I would do research for whoever was preaching, or, even, a couple weeks ahead, that type of thing. And, yeah. And then I did give them, some lunch and stuff like that for the team, but really got to watch them. So it was incredible.
What an opportunity. And then you became a church planter. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So when I was 15 years old, I found out about church planting, had no idea that you could start new churches, and found out about it through Southeast, actually, and Southeast partnership with, multiple different church planting organizations.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was like a light bulb went off for me of like, man, I already knew I wanted to be a pastor. And most of that was because the way Southeast had the church and obviously Jesus had changed my life. But, when I found out about church planting, I was like, man, I want to do that. And so from being a preaching intern, we went through assessment, when we were 21, my wife and I did. And when we went through assessment, we, Stadia was there and invited us to, basically kind of track alongside of them. I thought the assessment was going to be like, hey, in 10 years, maybe you can go do this. But they basically ended up saying, hey, in a couple of years, you're going to be ready. So we went to New Life Christian Church. From there, we were there for 4 years. And then New Life and the Baltimore, Washington Church Planting Network sent us to Annapolis to start a new church. And yeah, we were 25 and 26 years old at that point. So it was kind of crazy.
And that's Revolution Church, if I remember correctly. And you were there for how long?
Yeah, so I was there for almost 10 years. We moved to Annapolis in 2009, and I stepped into what I'm doing now in 2019. And we were there for 10 years, and really, just an incredible experience of, moving to a community spending a bunch of time getting to know the community. We did a community needs and assets assessment on the front side. And I really wanted our church to be good news in some way to our city. And so we did this needs assessment, found out that child hunger was actually the third highest need in Annapolis, which doesn't sound right when you think Annapolis, Naval Academy, sailboats, mansions, that type of thing. But there's actually a huge community of people who are living below the poverty line in Annapolis. And so we spent years working on that and as a church. And honestly, through working on that before we even launched, that's how our launch team came together. And so we basically said, hey, we're going to serve. And we invited people to serve alongside of us, whether they knew Jesus or not. And we ended up launching the church because of that. So.
Okay. And so I journeyed most of that 10 years with you and Sarah and have watched you along the way. And I just, I hear such good reports about Revolution these days, which I think is a testimony to your leadership and transition as well. But I was really surprised, a couple of years ago when I heard that Josh was transitioning out. Talk about what led to that transition and kind of what you were called into.
Yeah, it was a process. So one of the things that I just kind of held as a belief growing up at Southeast and with Bob Russell as our lead pastor, I can remember Bob saying to me, hey, if you want to make the biggest impact on the kingdom, you go to one church and you stay there your whole life, which was, of course, his story and obviously a very beautiful and impactful story. And so I was kind of like, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go plant a church, and then I'm going to plant a church planting church, which was always our goal. And so, we basically, when we moved here, we had our first church planter on our staff, and 2 years in, we sent him out, Scott and Caro, started the Foundry in Baltimore. And so, we kept doing that. In the 9 years that, after we launched that I led the church, we planted 8 churches, like direct.
Wow.
And it was awesome. Yeah, it was absolutely amazing. But probably about, I don't know, probably 7 years in, I started feeling just some weird, I don't even really know how to describe it very well, other than to say, I just wasn't sure that I was being as effective for the kingdom as I could be. And it took me a lot of wrestling to kind of figure out, I was like, is this just me being discontent, or is this something that God has put in me and is calling me to the next thing? And so I really kind of just got quiet and spent about a year in silence and solitude regularly and listening to the voice of the Lord, and felt like God was calling me into this next thing, which was to equip the church by creating technology that would help the church be the church. And so stepped into that in 2019 by starting a company called Flourish. And Flourish is still a company we're working on. And it actually, it's a nonprofit operating system that maximizes the way nonprofit and volunteers work together to make a difference by matching volunteers to the optimum role for them to make the biggest impact based on their passion, skills, and schedule. So we're still building that. The roadmap for that was way bigger than we thought it was going to be. And so it's taking way longer than we ever imagined it would. But along the way, we actually we're building AI tools into Flourish, and we just had this conversation one day where we were like, you know what, we could build kind of a smaller product that would really serve the church in some incredible ways with some of these tools. And so we launched this company called Church.Tech that started, and technically it started in March, but really we kind of really started getting out there in August. So yeah.
Okay. All right. So I got to back up. There's so much to unpack in this story. And so
I know. Sorry.
You have a successful church plant. You're 7 years in. You've been apprenticed by some of the greatest leaders, arguably in Christianity at that time. And you're planting multiple churches, and most guys of your age at that point are going to go, the story is usually, oh, some big mega church called me and now I'm going to go be this huge mega church senior pastor or whatever. And, or maybe I'm going to go plant another church. but you go into technology world. What the heck, Josh? I mean, if I remember right, you went to Bible college for your undergrad degree, right?
I did. Yes.
I went to the same seminary, and why technology? How technology?
Yeah. So I've always just been very curious about technology. And so actually, Greg, when we were in the discipleship journey group together,
Yes.
I don't know if you remember this, but the first time we met, all the guys were talking and we started talking about like apps and stuff like that. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, what about, have you seen this app? Have you seen this app?
Yeah.
Have you seen this
I
app?
remember.
And so then the next meeting, they're like, hey, app guy, what new app do you have? And so I've just always enjoyed that. And I've always loved the way you could kind of optimize your time and your capability and your influence through using technology. And so, yeah, I just like, I could see this need for Flourish within the church where we were sending our people. In fact, we literally launched this huge campaign within the church. We said, hey, we don't really even care if you serve inside the church as long as you're serving outside the church, which was a very risky thing to do. And everybody was kind of like, wait, what? And we were like, no, like we want you to go find your distinct maximum impact role with a nonprofit in our community, because we believe that's going to result in heaven coming to earth in some beautiful ways. And we'll figure out the internal workings of the church. And so we started matching people to like the best position. And, we saw some really crazy, incredible things. Like people ended up becoming like executive directors of nonprofits because of that work. And I was like, this is beautiful, but it'll never scale. Like even within our church, it's not going to scale. And so I started looking for a solution for that. Couldn't find one, even though there are platforms out there that talk about matching people to volunteer positions. They're not actually doing it in a sophisticated way. And so, which is not me trying to like, dog on anybody, but, they're just not. And so we were like, well, somebody's got to do this and maybe it's us. And so that was kind of how we stepped into the tech world. Yeah.
Okay. And so I want to unpacking this story now, because you were talking about, and then we got involved with AI and thought, well, AI can help serve this and do this. Okay. Let's just unpack that a little bit because, I think the general sense that I get with a lot of leaders out there today is there's a little bit of a sense of fear with AI. Yeah. And like, can God work through AI? Does it take the Holy Spirit out of it? How have you worked through that theologically at all? And where do you guys kind of land on that?
Yeah. So the AI conversation is really interesting because it obviously presents some risks and it, like anything, it's a tool. It can be used for good or for ill. I can
Absolutely
drive to work in my car. I can also accidentally, hit somebody with my car or intentionally, right? Like,
right.
so it's a tool. And the question in my mind, honestly, with it is, how is the church going to take that tool and actively engage and show the world, hey, here's an ethical way to use this. And, but yeah, so I'll come back to your actual question. Have I worked there theologically? Yes, I definitely have. And, I think that the conversation around, is AI something that pastors should use to just outright say, write me a sermon about Ephesians 5 or something like that, right? Like, I don't think that's an ethical use case for it. And that's a thing that, I really don't think anybody who is not either just in a really bad place on, and has like some unhealth they need to deal with is probably doing, anyways. But, what if we could take it and say, hey, here's the sermon I've written and help me analyze it for logic and flow so that I can reach this audience. And like, I think that's it's the same thing we would do with other people. Right. And, and so why wouldn't we use technology for that? Same way we use commentaries, right? Like it's not unethical to take a commentary. We're doing our due diligence. And so how can we incorporate the tools that are out there in a way that really does.
Let's talk about that progression just a little bit, because I think this is important with AI. So I went from, in my time, right, to writing my manuscripts on a yellow legal pad.
Yeah.
And by the time I was finished, I had piles of yellow scrunched ups on the floor and with notes and stuff. And then I would have my pile of commentaries behind me on the shelves, a limited number, right? Maybe 3 that I could use. And I would be reading, what do they have to say about this text and stuff. And then it progresses to now I've got, the screening and the keyboard. And now I'm able to edit my sermons online so I don't have that pile of paper. But then it becomes, I have access to the world of great thinking theologically at my fingertips on the web.
Yeah.
And oh my goodness, is that a game changer, right? But at the end of the day, I'm still having to read through all of those texts, all of those, now there's part of that that's fun. There's the discovery process. I'm going into what the nuances of the Greek language and what was culture like in Jesus' day. And I can find all that online. Okay. So tell me how AI takes it to that next step and next levels.
Yeah. Yeah. So, couple things. One, like the Greek tools and the Hebrew tools and Aramaic tools, those things can all be baked directly into the product. So even with, tools that were out a couple years ago that were just like, wow, this speeds up the process. I don't have to like pull out 10 commentaries and, blog through all of this. You're able to bake back into your study process far more quickly with AI. But then the thing that most people don't understand about AI is that when we talk about AI, for the most part right now, we're talking about large language models. And
Right.
large language models like ChatGPT or Claude or some of the others, they really, what they are doing is they've gone out and they've indexed, particularly with like ChatGPT. They've read, so to speak, everything that's ever been written. So when we say AI, it sounds like we're talking about Terminator, who's like a sentient being that can reason on his own. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is something that is derivative of human intelligence. It's deriving everything it can create and produce from what's already been written. So if you take that and you say, okay, it's read all my commentaries, and now I can actually have it help me study more quickly, I'm getting a massive benefit out of that. And then beyond that, I can have it look at what I've written and say, analyze this for logic. Help me illustrate this point more effectively. And you can bake into that the process of saying like, here's my target audience. Like, this is who I'm trying to speak to. And it will help me align what I'm saying to people.
Okay. Church.Tech. Church.Tech. And I know you have to do this because I know you're doing it all the time now. In a nutshell, what's your goal with Church.Tech?
Our goal is to help pastors spend more time with people and less time with technology. That's our goal. We believe that.
Okay, let's just stop right there. More time with people and less time with technology. I just did a podcast with Doug Foltz. One of the biggest problems that church planters make and church leaders make is spending too much time in front of the screen and not enough time with people. Hands down, that's one of the top 5 mistakes that church leaders make. And it's really easy these days to do that. And you're saying Church.Tech could help become a solution to that problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what we built with Church.Tech is AI tools for the church that literally allow you to take things that were costing you enormous amounts of time, effort, and energy, and or things that you wished you were doing and you weren't doing or weren't doing well, and put those on autopilot. So like, take for instance, like the first thing we built was the ability to generate a group leader discussion guide that was phenomenally excellent based on the sermon. So you upload your sermon, like minutes after you're done preaching, you can upload your sermon, and in 10 minutes, you can put together the best group leader discussion guide your group leaders have ever seen, text it to them, and bam, they've got their group leader.
Okay. What about children's curriculum from your sermon?
So that is actually something that we're getting ready. We're testing it now and we're getting ready to roll it out. And we can take a sermon, translate it into children's curriculum. And I mean, like, not just like, here's a lesson that is similar to that sermon. We can change it into things like skits. And I mean, with characters that your church developed within our platform. And now it's like ongoing characters every single week. It's the same people. And so you can use the same actors or rotate people in, that type of thing. Really engaging stuff. Then we can make a age appropriate discipleship discussion guide for small groups. And we can create age specific parent guides for the parents to be able to. So now on Sunday, parents are being preached to the same passage, right? High school, middle school, elementary is all aligned on a preaching schedule. The discipleship content's all aligned, and you're giving parents the ability to disciple their kids as they're going throughout the week.
Okay. This sounds like a really difficult and challenging process, Josh. But so I'm going to tell you my first experience with Church.Tech. It happened early last week. Okay. And I didn't even know that we had this. You and I were on the schedule to record this. I just had a staff member from Stadia say, you've got to check out Church.Tech. I had just done a talk for our staff. It was like a 12-minute talk on the 4 chairs teaching that's so important. And he said, run the 4 chairs. He said, just upload it and run it through Church.Tech and allow it to come out with notes and a summary of what you just taught. So that's what I did. Now, listen, Josh, all I did is hit a button, okay? And this is no joke, Josh. I know you know this. I'm speaking to you, but this is what blew me away. Less than 1 minute later, I'm reading this 2-page document that I'm going, how is this possible? How is this possible? Now, here's the reason it was so important, Josh, and I want to thank you and Sarah for this, because, okay, what it did, it had formulated using everything that's written out of there, the ideas I was presenting in a way that was so well presented. And, but it used some words that I'm going, no, those are some of the exact words that I want to stay away from because they pigeonhole me in a certain way. And so I spent the next hour going through and going, okay, but what do I want to say here? What he did is it formulated the arguments, and then I was able to tweak it and go back in. And now I have it on my whiteboard lined out. And so back to the Holy Spirit process, and I'm going, God, what is it that you really want me to say here? But my point is, in less than 1 minute, it allowed me to formulate what I believe is going to be a full new way of looking at the theological issue that I was dealing with and with our staff. Josh, it was profound. So from the bottom of my heart to you and Sarah, thank you, because it's impacted Stadia. I'm teaching it this week to Stadia.
Man, thanks, Greg. There's no higher honor than that. Like, I mean, to know that you're building something that is actually helping the kingdom of God. And, and as you said, right, like everything we produce, our goal is to make it 90% done, right? So you're the final filter, and anything that we're making from a sermon is already derivative of hopefully what you have, walked through a process with the Holy Spirit anyways. But yeah, man, thank you so much. It's
okay. So let's talk about, I want to go into another area. Let's talk about church finances, as a leader. I mean, it's always tough because I want to send out the notes on time, first time givers, ongoing givers that are giving $50 a week that I want to say thank you to them. And then you have somebody who's, just given the big $10,000 gift and you want to thank them. And it's like, what a burden to write all those letters. Will Church.Tech help with any of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, right now we have a little tool that basically helps you craft a really excellent, thank you note or note of encouragement, that type of thing on our website. We call them prompt buttons. So the idea is you put a little bit in, you click a button, and you get a lot of value out of it. And they're all free at this point. And so but yeah, like to your point, we can take, some small little bits of information about each one of those people and help you craft a really thoughtful note. And the point isn't to take away your actual engagement in writing that note. The point is to say, hey, we can give you inspiration for how exactly what you just said a few minutes ago, right? Like some of the stuff's going to come out and you're going to be like, I would never say it that way.
Yeah.
But it then helps you to know exactly how you would say it. And so, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
So tell me where Church.Tech is right now, what's going on, and how can we get involved with it? If our listeners want to check it out, like obviously I'm not getting any kickback from Church.Tech, though we could talk about that. But how do they get involved? How can they check it out, Josh?
Yeah, you can just go to the Church.Tech, Church.Tech, in your web browser. That'll take you to our landing page. You can create an account for free. You get 2 sermon uploads, and you can see exactly the power that
I just did it. Yep. It's very simple.
yeah. And so, and then, you can jump in, play with the tool, figure out all the different pieces that you can get. We're happy to do a demo with you as well. We love showing people how to get the most out of the platform. And then it's $1,000 for a year subscription and $100 a month, right now. And you get all kinds of stuff. I mean, you get video clips. So if you're uploading your sermon to YouTube, you can pull in your YouTube sermon and we'll splice it up into little clips that you can post on social media. We're getting ready to roll out.
I've looked at that. This is amazing because we're all looking at social media, right? And everybody's going on. We got to hire a staff person to do social media, which we do at Stadia, right? And she's phenomenal. But I'm thinking about the church planter out there who can't afford to hire a social media person, or and they've got a high school person. The point is that a high school kid could get on Church.Tech for you, upload the sermon, and now you've got instant sermon clips to post to social media, right?
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And wait till you see what we're going to do with social media. It's going to be crazy. Like the next phase of that, we're going to literally, so we can take your sermons and train a model so that it speaks like you speak. It speaks like your church. And then we can literally give you all these different effectively like templates for a vision post or a partner update post, or, hey, here's an announcement about an event, and it will literally write all of your social media posts for you. And then we'll add image generation, so you won't even have to worry about that. And the whole idea is not get rid of the person that you're paying to do social media if that's where you're at. It's, hey, that person can now go capture stories they can spend all their time tracking down the beautiful stories of discipleship that are happening inside your church so you can tell those in a more elevated way. Or if you don't have a social media person, you don't actually need one now. I mean, we can literally take over social media entirely for you. And what would have taken 20 hours a week will take you 10 minutes.
Okay.
I can say that. That's not out yet, as of the recording of this podcast. But yeah, it's coming.
It will be soon. The point is there's enough out there that people need to take a look at this. So go to Church.Tech, check this out. Now, you might decide it's not for you, but a lot of you are going to decide this is for you. Josh has been very candid with this. Don't use this in place of the Holy Spirit. Don't use it in place of God speaking into your life so that God can speak through you to people, because that's the dark side. We don't want to do that, but use this to enhance the ability so you can communicate more effectively and spend more time with people. Josh, thank you so much for your work on this, and thank you for being such an amazing guest on the Church Planting Podcast.
Oh man, great. Thanks. It's been so much fun.
Thanks for listening to the Church Planting Podcast. The Church Planting Podcast is part of the Stadia Podcast Network. To find more great episodes and to see how Stadia can help you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation, be sure to check out stadia.org/podcasts.